Spoiler alert, this is going to be a long intro because I need to explain myself. Hello everyone and welcome to Crafting with Delonda. It's me again, Delonda, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I struggled with the way to start this video because number one, this is part one of a two-part tutorial. This part is all about how to create this design in Leonardo Design Studio Pro. And if you're not familiar with that software, you might be asking, what is she even talking about? Leonardo Design Studio Pro or Leonardo Design Studio is the software that goes along with the Siser cutters, either the Siser Romeo or the Siser Juliet. And if you don't have either of those cutters, you may be very unfamiliar with this software. I know that I do have a community of crafters who do have those cutters and who are familiar with the software. So it's kind of created with them in mind. However, if you have the pro version or the paid version of the software, even if you don't have one of these cutters, you can use the software, the pro version of the software, to create your own SVGs that you can export into other software types. So, for example, if you have a Cricut and you don't have one of these cutters right here, but you have the pro version of the software, you can use the pro version and export your file into Cricut Design Space. So in this tutorial, I am only demonstrating how to create this file in the pro version of the software so that I can export it into whatever software I want. Now, in part two of the tutorial, I will be going into the WeCreat Make It software with the file that I create, and I will go on and demonstrate what parts that need to be cut and what parts need to be engraved with my WeCreat laser engraver and cutting machine. Okay, so I know that this tutorial is for kind of like a specific group of people. However, while I'm in the Leonardo Design Studio Pro software, I will demonstrate or give you some ideas of how you can use your file that you create with sublimation or either with print then cut or, different applications depending on where you plan to use it. So without further ado, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of show you how to work with the names, and then we'll go right into the software. And then when we come back for part two, we'll be in the WeCreat Make It software. So I'll give you time, a couple of days to make your file. And then when we meet again, we'll be ready to put the file together. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the first thing I suggest you do is write out the names you plan to use. So for example, if I was going to make another ornament with my family's name, I would just list the names. So we have Peter, then Delonda, then Miles with a Y, Madison, and Morgan. Now, what I suggest you do is start with the longest names. And if you have two names that have the same amount of letters, it doesn't matter which one you start with. So my name has 7 letters, but so does Madison. Let's go ahead and start with Madison's name. So let's put her name down here. And you can decide if you want to do horizontal or vertical. It's totally up to you. I am going to go horizontally. So I'll do Madison. And then, so now I can check her name off. And then I would probably go with Miles's name next because he's the only one who has a Y in his name. Now I could decide if I want to connect his name here to her name, or do I want to connect his name here with the S? So I think I'll go ahead and connect it here. Okay, so I can cross his name off. So now I can go with my name. Okay, Delonda. I can do, let's go this way. Okay, and then I could do Let's see, Morgan. Ooh, see, I'm kind of stuck unless I want to add her name here, and I really don't want to do that. I could add Peter's name right here and then add Morgan right here. Okay, so the goal is to have all of the names connected. Now let's look at another set of names because someone ordered an ornament from me, and these are the names she gave me. Okay, so you can see how I already connected it. She gave me, let's just do them again. So she gave me Jefferson. So Jefferson's name is the longest. And I could, you know, turn it this way. And then she gave me Genesis. Let's put Genesis right here. And then she gave me Michael. And then she gave me Damon. Let's do Damon's name right here. And then, so I got Damon. I got Genesis. I got Jefferson. She gave me Michael. She gave me Christian. Okay, and then she gave me Derek. And then Michael. Okay, I can do Michael right here. Like that. So she gave me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See? So that's the goal. Start with the longest name first and then just try to connect them. And my suggestion is to make sure that none of the names are too close together so that it's not too packed in. All right, now let's head into Leonardo Design Studio Pro. Before you go into the software, make sure you download the font that I have linked below the video. I did get it from Creative Fabrica, and this is the one that I suggest using from all the options. I'm going to navigate to where I have the file saved, and I'll show you what the two options are that are included in this bundle. There is a set of tiles that are filled in, and then there's a set of tiles that are pretty much open. If you are going to be using the file for like sublimation or print and cut, then I suggest using the ones that are tan like this. And if you're going to be using a laser engraver like I am in part 2, then I suggest using the tiles that are open and clear. So you'll see me import those here. I'm using these and I'm bringing them in as editable artwork. Next thing I suggest you do is to make a copy of the set of letters you're planning to use. You might make more than a couple depending on how many letters you need or how many names you're adding to your ornament. I'm just going to have, I think 2 or 3 duplicates, and that way I can start to work with the letters. Once you have a set, ungroup one set and start to move them over based on how you laid out the names before we got into the software. So, I started with my names, and that's all I'm doing here is just moving the letters over one at a time. So I have all of my letters. I clicked on Align Objects and Center. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it, is I am going to just move the letters over or the tiles over, making sure that each tile is touching another one, but not overlapping. So I'm just carefully moving them over. If you're going to use the arrow keys on your keyboard, if you hold the Shift key plus the arrow, the left or right arrow, it'll move the spacing over in small amounts, and so it won't be a big jump. Or you can actually just move the tiles over with your mouse. Now, what I suggest you do here is zoom in and get a good look at each of your letters. Make sure you can see the outline of each letter, especially if you're going to go on to part 2 of this video. I'm going to zoom out and start to add the other names. I'll add Madison. Remember, I only have 2 sets of letters and I've only ungrouped one. So, since I already have the A at the end of my name, I had to ungroup that second set to get the other A. You can, do it that way, or you can just copy and paste letters as needed. So I'm adding her name. And once I have all of the letters in her name, I'm going to select those letters and I'm going to make sure they're not overlapping. And I'm also going to make sure they are centered. I want the lines to be perfect in this case. So I'm double checking right here. I'm going to select each letter in her name, and then I'll go up to arrange, align, and center. And I'll go and just double check, making sure they're also not overlapping. Once I have them the way I want them, I'll select the whole thing and make a copy. Just in case I make a mistake, I'll have another set and I won't have to start all over again. Get into the habit of making duplicates so you're not always having to restart each project. Also, because Leonardo Design Studio doesn't have an autosave feature, if I were to have a power outage at any point, I would lose everything I've done. So get into the habit of saving your work as you go. I'm going to speed this part up because what I'm doing right here is adding in the other names. And once I got them added, I started to realize I didn't like the format of this one. I even, moved Miles's and Madison's name over to the end or to the second D in my name, and I still didn't like it. So I changed the format and kind of just like started over. So I sped this part up just so you can see it. But once again, add the letters, make sure they are not overlapping, but make sure they are still touching. I decided to start with Madison's name first instead of mine, since both of our names have 7 letters. And I thought I would go with this format instead and have Madison's name be horizontal. So I just started over. That's why this part is sped up. I made a copy. I'm also saving this just in case I have a power outage or anything happens. I won't have to start from scratch again. Adding the names, adding the letters, making sure they're touching and not overlapping. So I'm slowing this part down just a little bit because I definitely want to make sure you understand this part and to pay attention to this if you are going to be using your file for laser engraving. So I have the name selected. I am going to go into my offset settings or my contour cut settings, and I want to show you what to pay attention to if you are planning to use your file with a laser engraver or a cutting machine. I'm going to click on the option to add an offset, and I'm going to, let me zoom in on this part. You can see that in between Peter's, the E and the P, there's not a line. I want there to be an obvious line in between each letter. And because I don't see one, I know I need to move some of the letters closer together. So in between the E and the P. But if you look at the E and the R in his name, I do have a line because I want it to be obvious that there is a line, or I want there to be an engraved line on between each letter. If this is not important to you, like if you don't even care about that, don't worry about that. However, if you do care about it, just make a little bit of space in between each letter and continue to check before your file is complete. So what I'm doing right here is selecting the letters in Madison's name. I can select more than one at a time. And I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard to just move them over just a little bit so that I can make sure that line is there. And then when I finish, I can double check by going back into the settings to make sure there's a line. So when I click and I have them all aligned, I'm going to make sure they're centered the way they should be. I can look now and I can see a line. I don't see one in between the M and the A, but I can go back and fix that. All right, so now I have all of the names. I've double checked everything to make sure they all have a line in between. Now let's start actually designing. If you are planning to use your file with print and cut or with sublimation, this is where I'm going to just start to give you a few ideas. What I suggest you do is duplicate your completed, set of letters and group them. And then I also suggest you just open up a new page. So you'll see me open a new page and we will start to look at some design ideas. As you can see, I'm on a new page. I have selected a circle from the toolbar at the bottom, and I just resized it big. It doesn't matter what size the circle is at this point. Now, this is where we can start designing. You can make choices here about how you want to use it. I would suggest maybe choosing some digital paper. I'll make sure this file is linked below. I am going to bring the digital paper in as a background image. So I'll select one of these, maybe a lighter version, and I would select the background image option, resize the paper so that it fits, on the screen. And then what I would do is put the paper behind the shape. So the shape is going to be in the front, the image or the paper is going to be in the back. I just duplicated another circle so I don't have to keep, grabbing a second one, a third one, and all of that. What I'm going to do here is get the paper. I'm resizing it so it fits completely over the circle. And I am going to bring the circle to the front. I'll select both and I'll choose the option down here at the bottom menu. I will choose the option to intersect. When I do that, the paper will take on the shape of the circle. This is where I would go back and grab my file. I would click edit, copy, come back over, edit, paste, and I would just add it to the top. I would resize it and make it bigger so that it fits. And you might add some snowflakes or Christmas 2025 or whatever you want to use. I'm going to just have mine to say Christmas 2025. And I would click apply. You find maybe a script font or something big and bold. It could say whatever you want it to say. And then you would add it in to your ornament. Okay, what I'm doing right here is, double checking the text and making sure it looks exactly how I want it to look. And if I wanted to continue, I could, just flatten this and use it just like this, and my ornament would be complete. Or, I can resize it. The size of your circle will be dependent on the size of your blank. So if you're using a 3-inch blank, then your circle should be 3 inches. If you're using a 4-inch blank, then your circle should be 4 inches. And then you could make a decision on what if you wanted to add anything additional to this. And if you didn't want to use the digital paper, or once again, you can use the shaded tiles instead of the clear ones like the ones I'm using right here. Now I am going to speed this part up because all I'm doing is just adding some snowflakes. I got all of these little images from the design library, and this will be, of course, a matter of personal preference on how you want to fancy yours up. I think it will look nice to add, maybe a border around the ornament. All I did was went to offset and I added a border around the circle, and I just removed the front and added it right there. I'm kind of just resizing and moving the snowflakes around. This all right here is, going to be how you want to do yours, because this is, if you're doing it with print and cut or something like that, to take your file to a different software. You can also, go do it this way by adding a border. You can do it however you want to do it. You can change the color or have no border, whatever you want to do. Once you have your ornament exactly how you want it, if you are going to proceed with print and cut, then you would select it and make sure that you have your cut contours and you have your print and cut selected, and then you would click send design. If you are moving on to part 2, you would need to export your file. So let me show you how to do that. You have your files complete. What you'll do is select them and then click on File, Export Artwork, and save them as SVGs. And you would have to give them a name. I'm going to call mine Scrabble Ornament Templates or something like that. I'll save them wherever I want to save them. You'll save yours so that you can get back to them. And then we'll move on to part 2. Hopefully you did find this tutorial helpful. If you did, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for notifications because I do upload new content every single week. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks for watching.